So hi, back again to share some ideas about how to manage farm ground, and one of the things that kind of comes up from time to time is hunting rights and how that works with ag land leasing. And so I'm going to take a couple minutes to kind of give you my thoughts on this. Know that first of all, I'm basing this out of not necessarily a textbook or research study, but I'm basing it about what I hear from Nebraskans. I know what I hear about different people talk about, and what I'm going to share with you is I think is a very normal thing. However, every neighborhood tends to be a little bit different, so don't be afraid to do something that's normal in your neighborhood. And also know that what the landlord and tenant agree to is way more important than anything I've got to say about what's happening in this program. So just understand those two things, those two caveats as you go into this. And as always, if you have any trouble or questions about a legal issue, make sure you consult with an attorney or other professional that can help you with that issue. Hunting rights tend to be different depending on what the lease is. So in other words, if you have a crop share versus a cash rent on crop ground, that'll change how the hunting rights are viewed. If you have a different, they're different for pastures versus crop ground. And so what I'm trying to point out here is that when you're talking about hunting rights, it's probably one of those lease provisions that should be written down. And it should be written down in a written lease. Please don't do any of this stuff via some kind of a handshake agreement. Make sure this is written down, and make sure you have a lease that covers the correct provisions here, so you know how to go forward. For crop ground cash rent, hunting rights belong to the tenant unless they're held out of the lease by the landlord. So that's pretty straightforward. The only question always becomes if the tenant wants to sublease the ground to one of his friends or something like that to go hunt out there, and he's taking money for that rent, that gets some landlords fired up. So make sure that you have that discussed before the lease even starts. If the landlord has questions about that, they can even just withhold the hunting rights. That's fine too. And a lot of landlords will just hold their hunting rights. They won't let the tenant have them. For crop share leases, hunting rights belong to the landlord. And so there's no no hunting lease to a sublease there because it belongs to the landlord. They could choose to hunt it themselves, or they can choose to allow somebody to go hunt there. I just wanted to make sure that those are the general provisions that I think about when I think about crop ground. For pastures, knowing that we typically have a 5 or 6 month lease period, so that it starts May 1st and it's October 1st, or starts May 1st and goes to November 1st, or starts June 1st and goes to November 1st. Usually we're done by the beginning of November, so the lease is over before the hunting season starts. And so therefore, there is no, the hunting rights will always stick with the landlord. Not in any case should there be any hunting rights to go with the tenant, unless you'd have a year-long lease, a 12-month lease for pasture. And then, of course, you'd have to negotiate that, or if it's on some kind of a share, then they would still stay with the landlord. Otherwise, if there were some kind of a cash deal on that, then it could go to the tenant. But that's a discussion to be had before the lease starts. And whatever you guys agree to will be just fine. That's not a problem. But pastures are different because typically the lease is over before hunting season starts. Okay, so, I already mentioned this. What if I let people hunt for free? How does that affect what happens? What if I charge people to hunt? How does that affect what you're going to do with the land money and what you do with your liability part of this? I'm going to get to that in here in a second. Or what if my tenants are charging for people to hunt? That's the issue I brought up a couple minutes ago. So those are the things I want to address here quickly. The Nebraska Recreational Use Statute changed here, this was like, I guess 7 years ago, 2000, well, actually 8 years ago now, 2015. And it says that recreational use of ground, including hunting, but also fishing, boating, camping, pleasure driving, like ATVs, on any of this stuff, okay, is covered with the Nebraska Recreational Use Statute. And the summary of the statute basically says, if I let somebody go hunt on my place, I'm talking about hunting in this particular video, so we'll talk about hunting. If you go let somebody hunt for free, and that participant gets injured on your place, you are not liable because you were a good guy and let him go hunt. So just understand that the Nebraska Recreational Use Statute covers the landowner for allowing recreational use to happen as long as it's free. If you charge for recreational use of your place, I'm going to charge so much per acre, so much per animal harvested or whatever, your liability changes, probably increases. Either way, make sure you have insurance for the activity you're allowing. You work with that, work through the lease provision with your lawyer, and you work with your insurance professional to make sure you have the right insurance in place. Like for instance, I own farm ground. I have a general liability policy in place that includes the farmland, and also know that I don't charge for leasing typically. So that changes that. If you're charging for leasing, then you have to make sure the insurance person knows that, and they write you a specific policy to cover that, and it's going to cost more too. So just understand that those are the differences in the law. Either way, make sure you have attractive nuisances out on your farm, big ditches, that sort of thing, either posted or fixed, so that somebody can't get hurt in those type of areas that could consider to be liabilities. If it's physically possible, or it makes any sense at all, just have those things fixed or get them posted so that people know that, hey, there's a ditch here, don't go down, or go falling into the ditch or whatever's happening out there. So those are a few comments I wanted to make about hunting rights and ag leasing. Again, if you got any questions, go to cap.unl.edu or go to cap@unl.edu. That's where you can send an email, and somebody would be glad to get back to you on that. Allan Vyhnalek here, glad to share this with you, and thanks for listening in. I appreciate it very much.